Hey everyone, and welcome to Boston Autoblog. The Mk8 GTI has finally arrived, and I'm really excited to take a look at this car for the first time. You're joining me today not as a car reviewer or a journalist, but as a consumer, because as you guys know, I own a Mk7.5 GTI Rapid Edition in cornflower blue, and I, like most of you, want to know, is it worth upgrading to the Mk8? Has Volkswagen done enough to this car on the exact same platform where you can truly say, yes, I will upgrade to the Mk8 and it's going to be a great decision for me. But also I think a lot of people are wondering, is it maybe a better decision to just go with the Golf R? Well, that's why I am here. We're going to do an extensive walk around, see what is new for the Mk8 GTI, and at least when it comes to experiencing it for the first time, get you guys excited to take a look at it and test drive it for yourself. As we all know, the Mk7 and 7.5 generation for the GTI is really held in high regard. I think even for myself, I look at it and say it is the best generation for the GTI. It is the pinnacle for that car. Some people will say the Mk1 and Mk2, and I completely understand that. But the Mk8 has some big shoes to fill. It is the successor to the greatest generation, at least in the modern era. And, well, with its new looks, new technology, and slightly better performance, it might be the new greatest generation. But we're going to find out in this video and a lot more videos to come, as I plan on spending as much time with this car as possible before I make a really poor financial decision in my life and trade my GTI in for one of these. Now, before I get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Quirk Volkswagen in Braintree, Massachusetts, for allowing me to do this review. Their link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Volkswagen inventory. Also, before we get started, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you're notified every time a new video goes live on the channel. And so, without wasting any further time, let's get right in this review. In the US, the Volkswagen GTI is considered to be the king of the hatchback market, but it's also held in high regard as being one of the best cars you can buy below $40,000. With new challengers arising, such as the Hyundai Veloster and Elantra N, Mazda 3 Turbo, and Honda Civic Si, how do you continue to improve and find better ways to develop a car that fundamentally hasn't changed in 40 years, especially having produced a generation that buyers aren't willing to let go of yet? The simple answer is to modernize it. Give this hatchback the technology consumers expect in 2021. But for a car that's attracted enthusiasts for decades, it's a bit more complicated than that, as they want great handling, exceptional performance, and most importantly, a car that's attainable. The GTI has been able to achieve all of this throughout its history. But can the same be said for the Mk8? Starting off with pricing, the MSRP for an Autobahn comes in at just below $40,000. But be prepared to pay extra due to the car shortages, and this will vary across the country. Besides a new exterior design, everyone is wondering, what exactly did Volkswagen do to differentiate the Mk8 over the Mk7, as both generations are built on the MQB platform. Most of the mechanical improvements aren't visually noticeable, but the suspension has been stiffened for the front and rear to meet the demands of enthusiasts who enjoy pushing their GTIs in the corners. Maybe anecdotal, the Mk8 is now manufactured in Wolfsburg, Germany rather than Mexico, and the production quality is apparent the minute you step inside and close the door, and that alone is worth being excited about. While people are getting caught up in the road presence, it's what's underneath that matters. And it's for that reason, it's way too early to judge a book by its cover. However, getting into the new looks, you can say it's evolutionary rather than revolutionary, as dimensions and even some of the minor cosmetic features have been taken from the Mk7. Yet the front fascia for the most part is all new, starting with the LED lighting that's going to draw your attention immediately. As we've seen with the ID4 and also the Tiguan, an LED light will run the length of the front grille. But it's the 5-point fog lights that has everyone talking. With the honeycomb grille for the lower portion of the bumper, this GTI does look better in person, and it's possible that this walkaround doesn't do this car justice, but eventually it should grow on buyers as time passes. Best of all is that both headlights are illuminated for the GTI, unlike last generation, and that was a complaint many of us had, as the Golf R had a much more dynamic presence on the road. Moving over to the side profile, the Autobahn will be sitting on 19-inch alloy wheels, which is an upgrade over the 18th found on the S and SE. You'll have body color folding side mirrors with turn signal indicators to go along with blind spot detection for added safety. Then coming around to the back, there have been enough changes made where the rear fascia appears to be all new, starting with the LED taillights, which does have a resemblance to the Tiguan, and you could make the argument the same goes for the headlights as well. The GTI badge is now located below the Volkswagen emblem, as we're beginning to see a lot of that throughout the lineup. And maybe not a substantial difference, the dual exhaust outlets are a bit more pronounced than last year, and that could be due to the slight redesign for the rear diffuser. Under the hood, the GTI is powered by the same 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, this time producing 241 horsepower and 273 pound-feet of torque, and is paired with a 7-speed DSG. But you can opt for a 6-speed manual if you prefer rolling through the gears yourself. While this review is strictly a walk-around video due to this GTI just being delivered the night before, I did have the opportunity to take a quick spin around the block, and here are some of my initial reactions and comments. Alright, so join me in a very quick test drive, and once again, huge thank you to Quirk Volkswagen for giving me this opportunity. This is just going to be around the block. I want to get a good feel for this car, but like I said before, I want to spend a lot of time with the Mk8 GTI and Golf R over the next few weeks and months, because I have a feeling that this car is going to be quite special. Put it in sport. Now, that little quick acceleration kind of reminds me of what a Mk7.5 GTI would be on a tune. It feels quicker to respond. Now, what I really like here is we have a very nice, aggressive 10-2 positions, and I love the leather-wrapped steering wheel. It feels really nice in the hands. Also, of course, the head-up display. Love to see that in this car. So I do notice that the exhaust note is a little more throaty. Oh, it's too bad someone's in front of me. Oh, you can feel the stiffness in the back. It feels more planted in the back. It certainly feels different for sure. The suspension and the chassis is tighter and heavier. The steering is also heavier as well. Yeah, the steering input, it feels so much more planted on the road. There's not as much body roll here. I'd love to put some Michelin Pilot 4S tires on this, but this feels really good. It's just, there's a lot more confidence here. A lot more confidence in the Mk7. The suspension, the chassis, the handling, the steering, it's stiffer. This is more dynamic than the prior generation. I want to just give this guy a little more room, and then Ooh, that's a nice kickback. That's a really nice kickback. See, it's not radically different from the Mk7 and 7.5, but they've done enough to it when it comes to the driving dynamics where it feels different. It does feel different than the Mk7 and 7.5. I like it. I'm really liking this. I'm really truly liking this. A full test drive will be coming soon, and we'll take a deeper dive into what the Mk8 GTI has to offer. But for initial impressions, there's enough to get excited about. As usual, you will have front-wheel drive, with the Golf R offering all-wheel drive. And for fuel economy, you'd expect to receive right around 25 miles per gallon in the city, and 34 miles per gallon on the highway, which is about the same or a marginal improvement over the Mk7. Inside, you're greeted by basically an all-new interior in terms of layout and design. But you may be pleased to see that Volkswagen used similar materials found on last generation for the dashboard. With this model being an Autobahn, you have 3-level heated and ventilated Vienna leather seats for both the driver and passenger, with the driver's side being 3-position memory, while passengers will have to manually find the ideal seating position. Before continuing on to the new technology, the Mk8 GTI is going to share some cosmetic styling to other cars built on the MQB platform, specifically the Audi A3 and S3. Maybe a bit subjective, but the center console has been cleaned up a bit, where you no longer have empty or unlabeled buttons that objectively made this portion of the Mk7 look slightly cheap. Getting to that steering wheel, it's all new for 2022. And there's no denying that the almost touch-sensitive buttons will take time to get used to. And any pressure applied to these buttons will either turn on your cruise control or send you to a different menu on the digital gauge cluster. But speaking of that information display, this has to be the most impressive feature for the interior, and resolution and quality are pretty much on par with what we see from Audi, aside from the navigation map. This screen is fully customizable, where you can individually change each gauge to showcase relevant information, or you can switch to an entire different setup by pressing the view button on the steering wheel. Despite my appreciation and love for the analog gauges for the Mk7 and 7.5, the infusion of technology puts the GTI at the very least on par with rivals. Also a welcomed addition for the Autobahn trim is a head-up display, which will help keep your eyes on the road ahead. The infotainment system, on the other hand, has been subject to a lot of criticism, and quite honestly, the lack of physical buttons were surely missed. You'll have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility to go along with onboard navigation, and the Harman Kardon premium audio system, which ultimately is an improvement, and if you're an audiophile, you're going to love. The 10-inch touchscreen is responsive and more intuitive, where you have an increased amount of menus, and the graphics have certainly been updated to reflect how modern the Mk8 is. Owners of the Mk7 are going to notice the lack of dials to the volume, tuning, and climate control, taking away some of the user-friendliness from last generation. To set the mood, ambient lighting will help personalize your GTI, and once again reinforces that the Mk8 is progressing with the times. Of course, you will have a rear backup camera with trajectory to go along with front and rear parking sensors. Below, you'll have 4 quick access buttons, but for my fellow Mk7 and 7.5 GTI owners, putting the Mk8 into sport mode isn't enough. You'll have to put the transmission into sport mode as well for the most aggressive shifts, and that's something we normally see from Audi, and more specifically the S3 I featured a month or 2 ago. Making our way back to the center console, you'll have a cubby and wireless phone charging pad, and easy access to the 2 USB-C inputs. While arranged differently, you'll have 2 cup holders, and for the center storage compartment, there's really not much of a noticeable change compared to last generation. And rounding out the front seating area, above will be a power moonroof to let in some natural light to the interior. Now for passengers in the back, we're going to start off on the passenger side, and this seat is adjusted further back. It's also on a recline, and I still have a few inches of legroom to work with here. Obviously, this is not a family vehicle by any means. If you want to have a lot of interior space, go with the Volkswagen Tiguan. But this doesn't seem much different than the Mk7.5 GTI that I own. However, there is one noticeable difference, and that is headroom. I think they lifted the roofline a bit because, especially for the second row, I think you could have taller passengers back here and they won't be hitting their head on the headliner. So that is really great to see. But there still is enough room. It's still spacious enough for average size adults, I think even smaller kids. So again, it still has that practicality in that sense. Then on the driver's side, this seat is adjusted to someone of my height, around 5'5", and I have a good amount of legroom. So overall, what you have here is a vehicle that's still spacious enough if you do have some people in the back, but it's really not that much different from the prior generation. But what you will like with the Mk8 GTI and the Autobahn trim specifically is what you get for the interior back here, which is 2 rear air vents, also climate control, and 3-level heated outboard seats. Now, this car, it smells like an Audi in here. It smells like the Audi S3 that I reviewed about 1 or 2 months ago. And that's what it feels like for the Mk8. It feels more Audi-like than in the past. And that might be because this car is now made in Germany. And there's a lot going on here that I need to digest because as a GTI owner myself, this is a leap forward. And what you have here when it comes to the features, including the 2 USB-C inputs for the second row, we didn't get that for the Mk7 GTI. So I'm really liking what Volkswagen has done here. And also, of course, rounding out the second row seating area, you do get a center armrest with 2 cup holders. Now coming around to the back, as we saw in the last generation, just press inward on the emblem and lift up. And inside you're going to have right around 20 cubic feet of rear cargo space, which is actually a slight improvement over last generation. Now, I gotta be honest, I'm not noticing much of a difference at all, and that might be because there is stuff back here that belongs to this GTI, and that might be playing around my perception of how much room is actually back here. However, if they did maximize how much room you do have, they made the side pockets a little smaller. That's one thing I am noticing compared to my GTI. At least on the right side, it's still the same, but I think the left side is a little bit smaller, but you're not going to notice much of a difference unless you do have car detailing equipment and other items back here. Now, with the second row seats folded, you're looking at right around 35.5 cubic feet of room to work with. And again, it's practical. This is why you want to go with the hatchback over a sedan. Maybe if you are cross-shopping it with a Jetta GLI or a Honda Civic Si, going with the GTI is the better decision. But overall, there's no surprises here. You do have a rear cargo cover, as we saw in the last generation. And really, overall, this vehicle is still very practical for daily commuting. But also, I do think that you could fit maybe 2 or 3 bags of luggage if you are going on a road trip. So for a first impression, and spending about an hour to about 2 hours with this car, I am going to say this, that the Mk8 GTI is going to be received quite well. Now, we did not take it out for a test drive in this video. That'll be for a later date. I want to spend a lot of time with this car in the upcoming weeks and months because I got to be honest, having seen it in person, seeing what it's offering, I might want to upgrade. I think you guys might want to as well. Because the technology, I understand, from a technological aspect, it's different. There's no physical buttons. They've really moved away from that. It's more futuristic. And I've been pessimistic about this car. I have been very negative, relatively speaking. But this is a lot better than what I was expecting. Now, of course, when it comes to the center console, it comes right out of like an Audi A3 or S3. And as I said, with the second row seats, it smells like an Audi in here. That's what it feels like too. Just with the steering wheel, everything, it feels like an Audi. Clearly, there's a lot of part sharing now for the MQB platform, but also, of course, with a little gear shifter, comes right out of a Porsche 911. So I like having some of those features being put into this car. But I love the comfort aspect. The seats provide a good amount of bolstering. They do keep you in place. I do like them. They hug me a little bit more than my seats in my own GTI. Now, of course, when it comes to the dashboard, same materials as last generation. Really not much of a difference in that aspect. But when it comes to the design and when it comes to just what it feels like to be behind the wheel, I do think that this is a much better car than last generation. Now, of course, we're going to have to wait and see when it comes to performance, when it comes to ownership, and when people start buying them. We'll see how everything goes. But this is really a great improvement, and really for a first impression, I'm actually really excited for this car, and I'm looking forward to diving into the GTI more throughout the year. And actually, this is a nice appetizer of the Golf R. So, guys, stick with me on the channel. We're going to be taking a look at this car a lot more in detail. I want to take it out for a test drive, compare it to my GTI. But for a first look and for a walk around, I think this car is certainly worth taking a look at and maybe even buying. Because I hope you guys buy this one, because I'm going to make a horrible financial decision if you don't. Especially if you are going to Quirk Volkswagen. Pick it up, buy it, because I don't want to see this car in front of me anymore. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Also, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Boston Autoblog, so you can see what I'm up to and what vehicles I'll be featuring in the future. And I will see you guys next time.